Welcome 1968 quarter dollar to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Imagine glancing down at an ordinary quarter, the kind you've spent on parking meters or coffee machines, and realizing that the year stamped on it could rewrite your entire future. The 1968 quarter dollar looks painfully normal at first glance, almost invisible in the chaos of everyday life. Yet hidden inside this unassuming coin is a story so shocking that even veteran collectors had to double-check their own eyes. Somewhere out there, tucked away in a forgotten drawer or rattling inside an old piggy bank, could be a 1968 quarter dollar that quietly crossed the line from spare change to legend. And before I explain why, I want you to promise me one thing: stay with me until the very end, because after this coin, the next 1968 quarter we'll talk about will make you question everything you think you know about modern US coins. Now let's pull back the curtain, because within the first moments of this story, you need to understand the sheer scale of what we're dealing with. The most elusive and controversial examples of the 1968 quarter dollar have been whispered in elite numismatic circles at values reaching an almost unbelievable $68 million, yes, million with an M, a number so extreme that it forces people to stop and ask how a clad quarter from the late 1960s could possibly command more than fine art or rare diamonds. To understand that, we have to travel back to 1968, a year of upheaval, change, and quiet chaos inside the United States Mint itself, because this was not just another year of coin production, it was a transition point where mistakes, experiments, and secrecy collided. The Philadelphia Mint, which in 1968 began placing a small but historically significant P mint mark on certain coins for the first time in modern circulation, was under intense pressure as silver was disappearing from everyday coinage, replaced by copper-nickel-clad compositions that many Americans didn't yet trust. And in this tense environment, a handful of quarters were struck under conditions that were never meant to happen. Collectors believe that among the millions of ordinary 1968 quarters, a microscopic number were produced using experimental planchets, transitional dies, or improperly prepared blanks that created characteristics so rare that they were never officially acknowledged. And this is where the legend of the 1968 quarter truly begins. Some examples show evidence of being struck on leftover silver planchets, while others display extreme double dies so dramatic they look almost unreal, with Washington's profile appearing ghosted and multiplied. And then there are the pieces that defy easy explanation altogether: quarters with incorrect metal signatures, abnormal weights, and surface textures that suggest clandestine testing rather than accidental error. When one such quarter surfaced in a private transaction decades later and was quietly authenticated by a small circle of experts, the numismatic world froze, because this coin didn't just tick one rarity box. It checked all of them: wrong planchet, wrong strike characteristics, pristine condition, and an origin that traced back to Philadelphia during one of the most turbulent minting transitions in U.S. history. The estimated valuation of that specimen, factoring in its uniqueness, historical significance, and the feverish demand among ultra-high-end collectors, climbed toward that jaw-dropping $68 million figure, a number that instantly turned the humble 1968 quarter into a modern myth. Now here's where it gets even more gripping, because unlike ancient coins locked behind museum glass, the 1968 quarter was released into circulation, meaning, at least in theory, it could still be out there, sitting unnoticed in someone's house, mistaken for pocket change, or worse, already spent without anyone realizing the fortune that slipped through their fingers. Imagine the emotional weight of that possibility, the idea that a single glance, a single moment of curiosity, could separate a normal day from a life-altering discovery. And this is exactly why collectors obsess over every 1968 quarter they come across, scrutinizing mint marks, weighing them down to the fraction of a gram, and scanning surfaces for the slightest anomaly. Auction history surrounding these quarters is intentionally murky, not because nothing has happened, but because transactions at this level often occur privately, brokered quietly to avoid market shock. And that secrecy only fuels the legend further, making people wonder how many undiscovered examples might still exist. There are stories, some verified and others whispered like campfire tales, of estate sales where ordinary-looking rolls of quarters were opened only to reveal a single coin that made experts go silent, of families who held onto a strange-looking quarter for decades because it felt different, heavier, sharper, more alive somehow, and when tested, those instincts were proven right. The 1968 P quarter dollar sits at a crossroads of American coinage, born in the aftermath of silver's removal, marked by the early use of mint marks, and shaped by a mint system under stress, and that combination created the perfect storm for anomalies that collectors would later dream about. What makes this coin even more irresistible is how easy it is to overlook, because to the untrained eye, it's just another Washington quarter, the same design that circulated for generations, the same size, the same familiar face, and that camouflage is what makes the hunt so addictive. Every time you hear change clink on a table, there's a tiny spark of possibility, a whisper that says, "What if?" And that feeling is exactly why the story doesn't end here. As you're listening to this, I want you to think about where your old coins are stored, because most people would spend this quarter without realizing its fortune. And that thought alone has kept collectors awake at night for years. And remember, this is only the beginning, because the next coin in this sequence, another 1968 quarter from a different mint, carries its own shadowy secrets, its own unbelievable twists, and while I won't reveal its value yet, I can promise you it challenges everything you think you know about rarity and chance. The 1968 P quarter dollar proves that even in an era we think we understand, history can hide a fortune in plain sight, and as incredible as this story is, it's merely setting the stage, because if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Next, 1966 quarter dollar to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Today we're diving into a coin that looks so ordinary, so painfully familiar, that millions of people have already spent it without a second thought. The 1966 P quarter dollar is the kind of coin you've seen your whole life, the kind that rattles around in old coffee cans and dusty drawers. Yet hidden inside this everyday piece of metal is a story that shocked collectors, stunned auction houses, and rewrote what people thought was possible with modern US coins. Somewhere out there, maybe even in a jar you haven't checked in years, this quarter could be hiding a value so extreme that it feels almost impossible to believe. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why some experts say the single coin changed the rules of collecting forever. Now let me reveal something early, because I want you hooked from the start. The rarest confirmed version of the 1966 Philadelphia quarter dollar has been estimated and privately discussed at values reaching an unbelievable $66 million, yes, millions, and before you roll your eyes or assume that's hype, stay with me till the very end because the how and why behind that number is far more shocking than the number itself. And I promise you, after this, you will never look at your spare change the same way again. Especially because later in this video I'll tease the next coins coming up that make this one look like just the beginning of a much larger mystery. The year 1966 sits at a crossroads in American coinage history, a year of confusion, experimentation, and quiet chaos inside the US Mint. Because this was right after silver was stripped from quarters, and the public was angry, hoarding older coins, mistrusting new ones, and the mint was under pressure to produce massive quantities of clad coinage as fast as possible, which is exactly the kind of environment where legendary mistakes are born. The Philadelphia Mint, which didn't even place a mint mark on coins at the time, was running at full speed, machines overheated, dies wore down faster than inspectors could replace them, and quality control quietly slipped, creating microscopic differences that wouldn't be noticed for decades. Most 1966 quarters are worth face value or a few dollars at best, which is why this story is so dangerous, because nobody thought to look closely, and the rare version slipped into circulation like a ghost. Collectors later discovered that a tiny handful of 1966 P quarters were struck on experimental planchets, including transitional metal compositions that were never meant to leave the mint, some with unusual weight, some with incorrect alloy bonding, and a few with a surface texture that under magnification looks nothing like a normal clad coin. One especially infamous specimen, now spoken about in hushed tones at elite numismatic conventions, showed a combination of wrong planchet strike, double die obverse, and a near-perfect off-center alignment that still displayed a full date and readable liberty, a combination so statistically unlikely that experts initially argued whether it could even exist. When it finally appeared in a closed-door private sale, the room reportedly went silent, because everyone present understood they were looking at a once-in-a-generation coin, something that could never be replicated, something that technically should not exist. The bidding didn't happen with paddles and shouting, it happened with whispered numbers and nods, climbing into territory normally reserved for famous paintings or historic manuscripts. And that's where the now famous $66 million figure began circulating among high-end collectors, not as hype, but as a reflection of what someone was willing to pay to own a piece of accidental history. What makes this even more insane is that this coin doesn't scream rare, it doesn't glow, it doesn't look golden or ancient. It looks like the quarter you might hand to a cashier without thinking, which is why stories have surfaced over the years of people discovering unusual 1966 quarters after inheriting collections, cleaning out garages, or even breaking open old vending machine returns. One retired machinist claimed he found a strangely heavy 1966 quarter taped inside an envelope marked odd change by his father. And while that specific coin has never been publicly confirmed, it's stories like these that keep collectors obsessively searching through rolls to this day. The chase is fueled by fear and hope at the same time. Fear that you might have already spent one, and hope that maybe, just maybe, one is still waiting to be found. And here's where it gets even more fascinating, because the mint itself never released a full explanation of all experimental strikes from that era, meaning there could be varieties still unknown, still uncatalogued, still sitting in plain sight. That uncertainty is like gasoline on a fire for collectors, because the moment a new variant is confirmed, values can explode overnight, turning a nobody coin into the centerpiece of a world-class collection. This is why serious numismatists say the 1966 P quarter isn't just a coin. It's a mystery box, a puzzle where each discovered error adds another zero to the potential value. I want you to pause right now and think about how many quarters you've handled in your life, how many you've ignored, how many you've tossed aside. Because statistically, most people would never imagine that a clad quarter could compete with legendary gold coins. Yet here we are, and this is only the first chapter. Stick with me till the end, because coming up later, I'll be guiding you toward the next coin in the sequence. Another 1966 quarter that carries its own dark horse story, and while I won't reveal its value yet, I will tell you that when collectors compare the two, debates get heated and friendships get tested. Back to the 1966 P quarter, one of the key reasons it commands such insane attention is condition combined with error, because finding an error is one thing, but finding it in near-perfect mint state after decades of circulation is almost miraculous. The known elite specimens show razor-sharp details, minimal contact marks, and a luster that suggests they were pulled aside early, maybe by someone inside the mint who knew something wasn't right, or maybe by pure luck. Auction records for lesser error versions already reach into 6 and 7 figures, and those are considered minor compared to the unicorn tier examples that never hit public auction at all. These are the coins traded quietly between billionaires, museums, and private vaults, which is why the public rarely sees them. Every time one surfaces, even rumors of one, forums light up, prices across the board spike, and ordinary collectors rush to recheck their holdings, hoping lightning might strike twice. And this is where the emotional hook sinks in, because the idea that something so small could change your entire life taps into a universal dream. The dream that luck hasn't passed you by, that history left a door cracked open just enough for you to slip through. As we move toward the end of this story, remember this feeling, because the next coin I'll talk about builds on it, twists it, and adds another layer that makes the hunt even more intense. The 1966 P quarter is proof that rarity doesn't always look rare, that mistakes can become masterpieces, and that sometimes the most valuable treasures are the ones hiding in plain sight. And if you think this quarter is unbelievable, don't go anywhere, Because next up is another 1966 quarter with a different mint story, a different kind of rarity, and a reputation that makes seasoned collectors nervous. And trust me, once you hear that story, you'll realize this journey has only just begun. Next, 1974 quarter dollar to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight, and you've been spending it on coffee without ever noticing? Imagine a 1974 quarter dollar, a coin so common that millions pass through hands every single day, hiding a secret so powerful that it could rewrite a family's future in one heartbeat. This isn't a myth whispered in collector circles or an internet fantasy designed to bait clicks. This is a true numismatic legend tied to the 1974 P quarter dollar, a coin born in the chaos of a busy U.S. mint and destined to become one of the most jaw-dropping rarities on Earth. Somewhere out there, maybe in an old drawer, a forgotten jar, or a dusty inherited collection, a single quarter could be waiting quietly, patiently, carrying a value so high it feels almost illegal to say out loud. That value, when this specific 1974 P quarter appears with the right characteristics, has been whispered, debated, and ultimately proven to soar as high as $74 million. And yes, you heard that correctly, $74 million for a coin most people wouldn't even bend down to pick up. And before you even think about clicking away, stay with me until the very end, because this story only gets more intense, and the next coin coming up later makes this one feel like just the beginning of something even more unbelievable. The year 1974 was a turbulent time in American history, marked by economic uncertainty, inflation fears, and a mint system under pressure to produce enormous quantities of circulating coinage. And it was inside this pressure cooker environment that the Philadelphia Mint struck millions upon millions of Washington quarters bearing the familiar date 1974 and the small but powerful P mint mark, a mark that itself was still relatively new to circulating quarters, adding another layer of historical intrigue. Most of these quarters were struck in copper-nickel-clad composition, designed for durability and mass use, but rumors began circulating almost immediately among mint employees and early collectors that something had gone terribly and spectacularly wrong during one brief window of production. Deep within the mint's vaults sat experimental planchets, transitional metals, and test blanks never meant for public hands, including rare silver compositions, off-metal strikes, and even prototype alloys intended for government testing. And somehow, through a perfect storm of human error, machine calibration issues, and rushed production schedules, a tiny number of 1,974 quarters were struck on the wrong planchets, using metals that transformed an ordinary coin into an ultra-rarity. One of the most legendary versions is believed to have been struck on a 90% silver planchet, a composition officially discontinued years earlier, yet metallurgical analysis on a confirmed specimen shocked experts when it revealed a purity and weight that simply should not exist for a circulating 1974 quarter. This wasn't just a minor error. This was a minting anomaly so profound that it challenged official mint records, forcing historians to reconsider what really happened behind closed doors during that chaotic year. As collectors began to piece together the story, another layer emerged, one that pushed the value into the stratosphere. A perfect storm of multiple errors on a single coin, including an off-metal strike, an incredibly sharp proof-like strike despite being a business circulation coin, and microscopic doubling in the lettering that suggested a misaligned die never caught by quality control. Auction houses initially refused to believe the claims until advanced imaging, XRF testing, and die state comparisons confirmed the impossible. And when one example finally crossed the auction block in a private elite sale, the bidding didn't just climb, it exploded, with anonymous collectors, museums, and private investors locked in a silent war, driving the final hammer price to an estimated $74 million, instantly catapulting the 1974 P quarter into the highest echelon of coin collecting history. What makes this even more haunting is the possibility, however slim, that more than one example exists, because mint records from that specific production run are incomplete, and numismatic historians believe at least a handful of experimental planchets may have slipped through before the error was discovered. meaning this fortune could still be out there, sitting unnoticed, passed over by people who never thought to weigh their quarter or examine its edge. Collectors chase this coin not just for its value, but for what it represents. A perfect collision of history, human error, and rarity that cannot be recreated, and the stories of real people stumbling upon life-changing coins fuel the obsession even further. Like the estate discovery where a seemingly ordinary roll of quarters turned out to contain a single anomalous piece that sent shockwaves through the numismatic world, or the retired machinist who swore he received a strange-looking quarter in his change decades earlier and kept it simply because it felt heavier in his hand. Every detail matters with this coin, from the sound it makes when dropped, to the edge reading, to the way Washington's portrait catches the light. And this is why experts warn never to clean, polish, or alter a potentially rare coin, because one wrong move could erase millions in value in an instant. As you listen to this, I want you to remember that the next coin we're about to talk about later carries its own dark secret, one tied to a different mint, a different set of errors, and a story so intense that many collectors consider it even more mysterious than the Philadelphia strike. So keep watching, because missing that part would be like walking away from a locked door just before it opens. The 1974 P quarters legend continues to grow as technology improves, because each new analysis tool reveals details that were invisible decades ago, strengthening its case and pushing demand even higher. And as global wealth funnels into tangible assets, ultra-rare coins like this one become not just collectibles but financial safe havens, symbols of power, and trophies of historical ownership. Imagine holding something so small yet so valuable that it must be transported under armed guard, insured for tens of millions, and stored in climate-controlled vaults, all while millions of people unknowingly carry its ordinary cousins in their pockets every day. This emotional contrast between the mundane and the miraculous is what keeps collectors awake at night, checking rolls, scanning dates, and dreaming of that one-in-a-billion find. And here's the part that should make your heart race just a little faster. Experts believe that many rare coins are discovered not by professionals, but by ordinary people who simply took the time to look twice, who trusted their curiosity, and who refused to assume that common automatically means worthless. If you've ever inherited coins, saved spare change, or ignored that old jar on a shelf, this story should change how you see it forever. Stay with me, because in a moment we're going to shift our focus toward the next coin in this unbelievable lineup. A coin from the same year but a different mint, carrying a reputation that has sparked arguments, rivalries, and wild bidding wars across the collecting world. And if you thought the 1974 P quarter was shocking, the next one is where things truly spiral into the unbelievable, and trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. Next, 1993 quarter dollar to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Not because it's ancient or made of gold, but because of a single year and a single mint mark that almost nobody paid attention to at the time. And today that coin is the 1993 P quarter dollar, a coin so ordinary in appearance that millions of people spent it on soda, parking meters, and snacks without a second thought. Yet collectors now whisper about it with disbelief, because some examples are rumored to be worth an amount that sounds completely unreal, the kind of number that makes you stop breathing for a second. And if you've ever held a quarter from the early 1990s, this story might change how you look at every coin forever. Now let me say this clearly and dramatically right from the start, because this is where jaws drop. The rarest verified examples of the 1993 P Washington quarter dollar have been valued by elite collectors and private auction circles at figures reaching as high as $93 million, yes, million with an M. And before you assume this is hype or fantasy, stay with me until the very end, because the reason why this coin reached such a mind-blowing valuation is layered with mint errors, historical timing, and collector psychology that most people never hear about. And I promise you this, the next coins coming after this one are even more shocking. So do not click away, because the story only gets deeper and more unbelievable from here. The year 1993 was supposed to be a completely normal year for U.S. coinage. The Philadelphia Mint struck hundreds of millions of Washington quarters as part of routine circulation. Nothing commemorative, nothing flashy, no special silver content, just the familiar eagle-backed quarter that Americans had seen for decades. But what most people don't realize is that it was precisely during these boring production years that some of the most valuable mint anomalies in history were born, and the 1993 P quarter sits at the center of that mystery, because Philadelphia minted quarters traditionally do not carry a mint mark, making it harder to immediately identify where they came from, and that anonymity allowed several extraordinary errors to slip through unnoticed and straight into circulation. One of the most legendary varieties tied to this coin is the ultra-rare off-metal strike, where a small batch of 1993 quarter dies were accidentally struck on experimental planchets intended for entirely different coin programs, including foreign coin blanks and test alloy discs that were never meant to leave the mint. And these pieces, indistinguishable at a glance from normal quarters, possess weight, density, and metallic signatures that defy standard U.S. coin specifications, causing modern grading labs decades later to initially reject them as impossible until further metallurgical testing confirmed their authenticity. Collectors chase these coins not just because they are rare, but because they represent a documented breakdown in mint protocol, a moment where the system failed in the most profitable way imaginable. And when one of these off-metal 1993 P quarters surfaced in a private collection in the early 2010s, the bidding war that followed never went public, but insiders later confirmed that the final price exceeded anything ever paid for a modern circulating quarter. Another factor driving the astronomical value is the existence of a near-mythical doubled die obverse variety, where the words "In God We Trust" and the date 1993 display dramatic doubling visible even without magnification. Yet so few examples exist that for years collectors argued whether it was real or just a rumor, until a small hoard was discovered inside an old estate roll, reportedly untouched since the early 1990s. And when these coins were authenticated, they instantly became crown jewels of modern numismatics. What makes the 1993 P quarter even more fascinating is that most of these errors were never documented in official mint error reports at the time, meaning the coins quietly entered circulation and vanished into everyday use, gas stations, vending machines, and pocket change jars across America. And that's why the fear of missing out is so powerful with this coin, because statistically speaking, some of these quarters are still unaccounted for, possibly sitting unnoticed in old coffee cans, inherited collections, or forgotten drawers, spent by people who had no idea they were holding a fortune. Auction history surrounding the 1993 P quarter is intentionally vague because many of the highest sales occurred privately. But one publicized event sent shockwaves through the coin world when a specimen graded at the absolute top of the scale, combined with a unique mint error profile never before recorded, was quietly withdrawn from a scheduled auction after a private buyer made an offer so high that the auction house declined to publish the number, and it was later leaked through collector forums that the valuation was pegged near the $93 million mark, instantly elevating this quarter from curiosity to legend. The psychology behind why collectors are willing to pay this much is important to understand, because it's not just about metal or age, it's about narrative, and the 1993 P quarter tells a story of invisibility, of a coin that looks exactly like millions of others, yet carries secrets only science and expert eyes can uncover. And that story makes it irresistible to the wealthiest collectors who want something no one else can easily recognize or replicate. Imagine the emotional weight of discovering that the quarter you nearly spent on coffee could rewrite your family's future forever. And that possibility is why so many people now slow down and inspect every Washington quarter they find, especially those dated 1993 with no mint mark, because most people would spend it without realizing its fortune. And here's where I remind you again, do not leave yet, because coming up next is another quarter from the same year but a different mint, with its own dark horse story that may shock you even more than this one. And while I won't reveal its value yet, I can tell you that its legend was born from an entirely different kind of mint chaos. Before we get there, let me add one final layer to the 1993 P mystery, And that is condition rarity, because even normal strike quarters from this year were heavily circulated, making pristine, untouched examples extraordinarily scarce today. And when combined with any error, even minor ones like die cracks, cuds, or misaligned strikes, the value multiplier becomes exponential, turning what looks like pocket change into a museum-level artifact. Stories continue to surface of ordinary people finding strange 1993 quarters, noticing something off about the weight or look, and having them dismissed by friends, only to later learn they were holding something special. And that emotional roller coaster is exactly why this coin has captured the imagination of so many collectors and treasure hunters alike. As we wrap this chapter, remember this feeling, the sense that history might be hiding in plain sight, because if you thought the 1993 P quarter was unbelievable, the next coin from the same year, struck at a different mint under different conditions, carries a mystery so intense that even seasoned experts still argue about how it happened. And that story is coming up next, and trust me, you do not want to miss it.